I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Ravi Singh. Ravi is a design executive with 25 years of experience in UX, UI, marketing, development, product, and user research. He's developed high-performing research and design teams at multiple organizations, and he's championed the business value of UX. He's currently Vice President of Design and User Experience at Pros, an AI experience software company specializing in pricing and revenue optimization solutions for global businesses. Please welcome your next speaker, Ravi Singh.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can see my screen. Really excited to join you all today. I always like to start my presentations with HFI, proclaiming the fact that I am actually a certified usability analyst with HFI, and I've put a lot of my team members through certification training, and it's brought so much value to our careers. So I definitely want to thank HFI for kind of being there as a resource early on. I've been in the UX field for about 25 years now, and a lot has changed, especially in the last 18 months, hasn't it? With the onset of generative AI being kind of democratized for everyone, it's also creeping into a lot of the work that we do. Maybe creeping in is not the word, it's coming in, very, very fast. But there's aspects of AI that sometimes do feel a little creepy, a little unknown, right? A bit like the Matrix or the Terminator. And it's because AI is very powerful and is very impactful, and it's a bit unknown. But that power and impact only comes through when it's integrated into experience. And the good news for us, we're the experienced people. So this means a lot to us. It's a huge opportunity for us here. It's interesting how that plays out, because even though we're talking a lot about generative AI, there's different forms of AI, and sometimes it creates a great experience by creating no experience at all. For example, with credit card fraud detection, that's something that's running all day long behind the scenes, and it's helping us avoid difficult or negative customer experiences. So when you don't get that phone call from the credit card company, that's because AI is smoothing out what could have been, some bad news. It also works in the foreground, and many of us use tools today, Figma, Miro, other tools that have integrated AI to make our jobs a lot easier. And sometimes you could say, oh, that's sounds like cheating because this used to be so difficult for us to do. But as you build trust with your tools and you start to see that it's actually saving you time, and the results are very good and acceptable, and they're in a sense draft, and you can do with them what you want, it actually liberates us to do what only humans can do. So there's a lot of opportunity, and there actually is a necessity right now to integrate AI into our user experiences. But with that, there's a lot of questions. There's really a lot of questions here. We don't just jump into it. We've got to do this with some degree of intentionality. So, for example, how do we adjust our traditional UX mindset and practices to strategically embrace AI in this new world? What guidance can we give to our product teams? They're kind of looking to us, as thought leaders in terms of experience, interaction design, and what's possible. And do we just sprinkle AI on our UIs, or is there a better way? I mean, does every UI need a chatbot? Seriously. So my thought is that we should step back and put our design thinking hats on and design a principled approach to how we're going to solve this problem. The way we did it was this kind of three-step process. And, every time you guys see slides like this, they always sound about familiar, right? Because at the beginning, there's something unknown, and by the end, you've solved the problem. But let me walk you through this at a very high level. There was a lot of unknown. So we needed to start with some online research to understand what generative AI is, what AI is broadly, how you can leverage it. And then we started exploring some ideas internally. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Then with all that exploration, we sort of synthesize that into patterns and knowledge that we could define and share back with the organization. to provide them guidance and kind of set them standards. And the third part was socializing into the organization. If you did the first two and you didn't socialize, then the impact of your knowledge and direction really wouldn't be realized. And the point of the third step is to win hearts and minds, because we could do all this great work, but if people haven't bought into it, then it doesn't really come to fruition. So starting with the exploration, our design and research team, actually developed a design sprint that was 1 week long, where we basically did ideation in this field of AI and what it could do for our user experience and our product platform. Now, it wasn't just the design team. We actually engaged with people across the entire organization, literally from product team to the implementation team, the support team, and even the security team, marketing as well. Like every group had some contribution to this. And we generated over 140 ideas, some of those that turned into concepts that we pitched. As I mentioned, we also did a lot of online research. There's so much research and content and resources out there that it's a good way to do your homework rather than trying to invent everything from scratch. Go out there, see what other people have come up with, and see how that actually matches to your business context, your product context, and the context of use for your users. Then our design team kind of brought all that together and started to explore a lot of these topics that might set the stage for our design principles using AI. And that range was everywhere from experience all the way to ethics. So there was a lot to get our arms around and synthesize and shake out into a number of key categories of principles that were relevant to our business. And at this point, we invited product stakeholders back in, particularly product management, the AI team or science team, and engineers to give us feedback on this, to see which ones resonate the most, and also to cluster these into 2 or 3 big concepts or big ideas or big principles that would be easier to remember and to repeat and storytell as we socialized these concepts. So at this point, you're going, all right, Ravi, what are these principles? So I want to pull the curtain back and bring the principles actually on stage at this point. So our first principle, and I want to just stress something, this is very specific to our company. You might find these resonate for yours as well, but I'm sharing kind of what came out of our process for our context, our business, our users. And my intent here is to share this to inspire all of you to consider the same as you're embracing AI. So in our case, being an AI company ourselves and delivering very impactful recommendations for our customers to change their pricing and sales and revenue management strategies so they can get incredible uplift in terms of their profit. It's really important for our customers to trust our systems and trust our recommendations. So when we integrate AI, we need to foster trust with them, be transparent about what's feeding our recommendations. And when we provide answers, also provide the evidence that goes along with it. Since we're also managing data and bringing AI into the mix on the front end as well, we've got to build trust with them regarding the privacy and security of their experience. The second is being human-centric. So we are UX folks. We advocate for users and creating great user experiences. And that doesn't change now that we have robots in the mix who can influence our experiences and even perhaps fast track what's possible on the UI. But you still have to adapt the possibilities with AI to human behavior so that you get real engagement, right? Because again, if we mess up with trust or we forget about usability and we just start putting outputs from AI into user interface without really assessing what the experience is like, it's going to fail. We're going to get rejected. So we still have to keep things easy to understand. We still have to consider performance. We also need to provide a feedback loop to our end users so they can tell us whether they agree or disagree or like the recommendations or don't. And also to make the data that we share with them digestible, as well as being able to digest their data into our system, in which case we are leveraging AI to do some data cleansing and data mapping work. Basically, make their lives easy. Nothing has changed there. And then the third one is setting alignment. This one was a little difficult for us to wrap our minds around, actually, the UX team and our principal scientist at our company shared with us a lot of thoughts about setting alignment. And what he was really trying to push us to think about, which comes naturally, I think, to UX folks and product folks, is not just to think about the user's needs, but also think about the customer's needs, like the buyer, and also the business goals, as well as the product strategy, and try to get alignment across all of those as we were making determinations of what should go in the actual experience. Um, you know, one good example of this is like with TikTok. They actually slow down parts of what could be a fast user experience to capture more user interactions that can then be fed back into the algorithms to provide higher quality content, more relevant content. So sometimes we need to slow down the UX to speed up, I guess, quality and accuracy, or later in the mix. So that's kind of an alignment between user goals and user experience and business goals. So I'm going to give you a couple examples using one of our interfaces. Again, enterprise software, very data heavy, and there's actually neural networks in the background that are running all these calculations and all the things you see on this screen. So it's an incredibly powerful backend AI system. But on the front end, we've also integrated elements to make it just more engaging and approachable. So let's talk about the first principle of fostering trust. So this system is all around price optimization, giving you a target price that we want you to adopt so you can win more sales. And by doing that, you're going to get the highest profit while closing the most deals. And these recommendations are explained visually, verbally, but also with supporting data. So you can see that this $212.40 target appears in 3 different places on the screen, and we're actually trying to tell 3 different stories to you so you can really understand the data and take our recommendations, take some action, and realize the value from the system. We also have links and dialogues in the user interface that help you dig into your own questions, like how do we arrive at this recommendation and what factors influenced my price? So you can dig into that, get more underlying data, and believe in the system. Like over time, you probably won't need to do that because you will have built trust with the application. The second is to be human-centric. This is big data. It's very heavy stuff. It's very complex, but even in simpler AI scenarios, you still have to be human-centric. We used to solve these opportunities in the past was to create data grids, provide all the data to the end user, and let them sort through it on their own. But what we do now is to leverage kind of conversational design to make the user interface and the data more accessible. We use natural language, visual hierarchy, and data visualizations just to make it all easier to consume. So this looks very friendly. There's really clear color, scale, typography, in natural language that makes the user have more of a conversation with the interface. And we also leverage AI to create summaries that are easier for end user to ingest, rather than just giving them a bunch of data for them to figure out on their own. So that's the power of design. It's also the power of research, because we've talked with hundreds of end users to optimize these interfaces. And then thirdly, we were talking about alignment earlier. In this case, our application can frame results in a way that reflects the customer's goals versus kind of what we're getting from our algorithms. We kind of look at the two things and say, how can we take that science and map it to what questions end users are trying to answer in a way that's the most direct and easy for them to consume. So there's this connection between the two things. And some customers want to look at revenue, some at margin, and so there's an opportunity to personalize that experience for them. As well, there's other parameters that they can see, and we can customize that in the user experience as well. So, alignment also has to happen at the product level, in the sense that the product has to be able to support this type of customization so that their end users are happy, their bosses and buyers are happy, or their customers, we could say, as well as our business happy, because we're all profiting. So the principles are great, but you got to put them into practice. And one of the ways to get the word out is by developing some type of a communication strategy and a design system so others can consume it internally in your organization. We all know about design systems, so I don't need to talk about that today, but I can say that AI can be part of your design system. It's going to do what design systems normally do. They improve consistency and provide direction. They typically speed up development. But one of the things we found as well is that by setting a standard and kind of documenting this and socializing it, we can help reduce some of the rogue approaches that happen at this stage of experimentation throughout an organization and really throughout a market as well. So really important to take a position, document it, and socialize it. So in our design system that is currently underway, we do some things like defining not visual things, but other qualities that will influence voice and tone, for example. Think about our AI as a persona, its characteristics, voice and tone, its strengths and weaknesses, and be very clear about what that personality is so that as we're designing, we're thinking about the AI as a conversational element, as a personality, as someone you can trust and depend on. The other thing that we do is consider how we can notify very subtly and notify the end user that something is powered by AI. So we've created some stylistic elements that have glows in a different color scheme, so people know that this is extra special. There's some magic here. It's one of the things that you see Meta doing right now with their search bar. We've seen other companies do it as well. So that's part of our design system approach. And then lastly, I mentioned that we want to win hearts and minds. So we've had a very concerted strategy around how we're going to communicate. Whenever I talk to UX folks about making an impact in your organization, leveling up, getting into positions of leadership, I always talk about communication, that we've got to get out of the weeds. Think about the stories we can tell that are going to resonate with our organization, and talk a lot, like repeat, repeat, repeat. So we've done things like monthly or quarterly UX showcases, where we talk about what the team does. We integrate the design principles into that. We've done all hands meetings, workshops, like I mentioned earlier. We have an internal website that represents not just the UX point of view and perspective on AI, but also, and almost obviously, our science department's point of view as well, our implementation team's point of view as well, some content from engineering. So that all comes together so we can build bonds and have one unified voice to move the organization forward. We also have a public blog. This is my latest blog post. I think it was back in February on the same topic, which you're welcome to check out at pros.com/ascend. And, this is one of the things that's maybe not as prioritized when we're down in the weeds figuring out design and designing products. But in order to make your strategy successful, you've got to prioritize communication and connecting with your different constituents and doing it in a way that is very particular to them. I've given this presentation before to 3 different audiences, including today, and every time it's a little bit different. So my last note is that I'm sure many of you out there on research and design teams, just like ours, have some type of design system. And I would suggest that as you are embracing AI as one of the new colors on our palette, you should consider how you include it, incorporate it in a very intentional way, and develop a strategy to integrate AI into your experience. So you can experiment a lot and come up with some pretty cool ideas, but when you can get to the core of what your company represents, what their mission is, what the mission of each product does, and what the key goals of your users are, you can align that with AI design principles to take each step forward very intentionally and effectively. All right. So thank you very much for your time and attention. You can follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to take some questions.
Awesome. That was great, Ravi. Let's see about questions. So far, I think people are still typing in their questions mostly. Did get a question sent to me through the chat. I'm not seeing it because it's by direct message. But I do want to prioritize. I see I see one came through in the Q&A box. Desh Rath asks, could you reiterate the TikTok example?
Yeah, so the TikTok example is interesting. So I don't recall the specific interactions, but there's some interactions in TikTok, and you can think about this with really any website. Let's say you're doing something like an e-commerce checkout flow.
Hmm.
You could make that very streamlined into one screen and create a really good user experience, but not quite understand where the moments are for optimization. And if you broke it up into multiple screens, it's a multiple kind of step checkout process. Now you could examine where the drop off is. It might slow the user down a bit, but you could examine where the drop off is and what some of those interactions are. And then perhaps by slowing them down along the way, actually give them recommendations or upsells because you're responding to the interactions that are kind of going on. So it's kind of like a way to slow down to optimize later or to provide greater value in real time. It's a little bit
Hmm.
hard to describe. I apologize for that, but
It's interesting.
sometimes when we do very slick, fast user experiences, we kind of lose the opportunity to learn and respond.
Hmm. So the recommendation from that then is to slow it down in that way and make it more steps in that way. Is that what I'm hearing?
Sometimes, and for
Yeah.
TikTok, the reason they have more interactions than necessary, because you see this, I
Yeah.
think, in most, even Instagram, you see this in a lot of our applications, Facebook, etc. Sometimes there's just these extra clicks, but what they're doing is collecting data, right? And that
Hmm.
data goes where? It's not just sold, it's sometimes going back into the algorithm to give you more relevant content afterwards. So that's why I say if you think just about our UX attitude, we always want to make things easier, simple, and fast. But sometimes it's good to slow down if you can collect some intelligence to create better, not faster.
Great. Guys, if you're not asking questions, you might want to upvote the questions that are there. We're getting a lot of questions now, and I use the upvotes to prioritize. So just a little heads up that you can help to guide this part that way, for those of you attending. I do see one of these has been upvoted already. Graham Douglas asks, you mentioned that the design system helps to manage rogue implementations. How have you responded to challenges about slowing innovation by forcing a design system?
Oh man, that's such a good question. That's a really great question. Because we don't want to slow down innovation. But what's
Mm,
already happening is we're seeing, for example, some components like chatbots are spawning up throughout the organization. And they're looking a little different. Considerations are a little different because these teams are working a little independently.
mm,
And we like to bring them all together to synthesize all those learnings and maybe also agree on which technology we're going to use and have some consistency so when our customers end up seeing these different chatbots, their expectations are met because they're consistent across all those. So it's okay, I think, to speed up right now while you're in exploration and ideation experimentation mode, but we do need to slow folks down. Otherwise, our brand and our experience is going to be just too fragmented, and
mm.
that's not a good customer experience. It's a bit of a balance. There's a point to get out of the way, and then a point to say, hey, we're here with a purpose as an organization, and let's slow down and yeah, just do this better in a consistent way. Now, the good thing with that too is once we agree on that, you have the best chatbot, for example, it's perhaps put into a repository, it can be plugged in and it gets all of the learnings illustrated into one thing versus having all these different kinds of chatbots that have their pros and cons. I'll say just while you're
Excellent.
looking for
Go
that,
ahead.
I'll
Yeah,
just
yeah.
say that this idea of slowing folks down while they're innovating, it's interesting because I did mention
Mm,
this notion of kind of building support across the organization. And it was in fact some of our engineering leaders and science leaders and product leaders, along with me, that recognized that we needed to get some consistency, and that if we were to do that and share knowledge together and agree on what's the best approach, we would actually start speeding up again. So you got to build those alliances. It's very, very
yeah,
important. Yeah.
goes back and forth that way.
Yep.
All right. John's question, John Sorflatten asks, great to hear your support for your team. Do you have examples of sticking points about AI adoption that your team found hard to understand so we can be aware of such sticking points?
Sticking points around AI adoption. Well, I think the main thing is I mentioned it earlier, this idea of sprinkling AI into your experience. I
Yeah.
still find that very problematic as a UX person. I don't want to just add a new feature onto an interface, acting as if it's adding value. So the biggest sticking point for us is really validating that we're adding value and
Yeah.
not just uh, keeping up with the fashion of the times, you know?
Yeah. Interesting to manage those perceptions. Let's see. Shantanu Dixit asks, how do you prepare the team to be ready with an AI ask? Are there any references for UX AI best practices?
Could you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah. How do you prepare the team to be ready with AI ask is
Ah,
how the person phrases it. Are there any reference for UX AI best practices?
yeah, it's been more than about a year and a half now. We've been talking about AI, and we knew that there's a lot of unknown.
Yeah.
So we've created things like internal design team challenges and research challenges, where as part of our team meetings, we'll discuss an opportunity to either explore and find out what other companies are doing and bring that back and do presentations to each other. Or right now, we're inventing some new solutions for our existing products, leveraging AIs, just coming up with concepts. We're not even expecting these will all get built, but what it does is it helps us build our AI design muscle. We also have invited external speakers to come to our team meetings and talk about what they're doing in their companies, just to give us a different point of view. So a lot of it is engaging the team to dive in versus expecting that there is a resource or training out there that's going to teach us everything we need to know. Because
Mm,
it is so highly contextual for your business and
yeah.
who you are as a designer, how you see the world. You know. No, there's a question. The previous question,
Mm,
there's around sticking points. I'll give
yeah.
you one more example. I personally had a huge sticking point regarding a chatbot that we built that is really amazing because it taps into our entire knowledge base and built a large language model all off of our knowledge base and our support content. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But I have a hard time about building a chatbot like that, not having analytics on it and not
Mm,
having a user feedback loop on it. Because there's this notion in lean that you can just put stuff out there, learn from it, and we'll improve it. But how are you learning? There's no analytics on that. There's no
mm,
thumbs up, thumbs down. There's nothing to learn.
yeah.
What you might learn is just going to be from people who are complaining,
Yeah.
and then we market it to other folks that, hey, we've made this great progress. But without that learning loop in there, it's difficult for me to accept launching. And I think that's a great conversation we have within our organization.
Mm, awesome. Maybe time for one more. Praful Patil asks, how do you build in transparency with AI summary and ensure that you have summarized what the user wants?
Well, that's a great question. And let's go back to traditional UX approaches, right?
Mm,
So I think progressive disclosure is our friend in this case.
Mm,
Because in some cases, we might have a single data point on the screen, but to explain it, it you may need to give a spreadsheet worth of data, maybe
yeah.
even some verbal explanation, and possibly you could use AI to create a chat around it.
Mm,
So the way we'd go about it is to do the least first and give some type of trigger where you could dig a bit more, and maybe another trigger to chat with AI to understand the explanation even better, or the data point even better. So don't try to do it all on one screen. I recognize some of the screens I showed you looked a little complex, but they're
mm,
actually not that complex if you consider the context of use. For example, someone who is a market analyst, they use those screens that are just full of so much data looking at the stock market, and it looks overwhelming for regular people like us, but they're pretty tuned to that and they operate well. Or like a airplane cockpit, it seems overwhelming, but it's not. So that was about the right data density for our end users, but they do need more. So we give it to them progressively.
nice.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the time that we have. Thank you so much, Ravi. Everyone, please give Ravi a big thanks with the reactions. You can give some applause. Stop the recording. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Noah. Appreciate it.